All right, so I'm working on my portfolio again, and I want to add something in that I haven't done before. Now, recently I got back into reading books. I used to be a big reader whenever I was a kid in middle school, and for whatever reason, during high school, I just kind of stopped reading, and I haven't really been much of a reader since. But I decided that I was spending a little bit too much time watching videos or movies or TV shows, and I wanted to spend my time doing something a little bit more productive, or at least maybe a little bit more healthy, like reading. And so I picked up a few books, and I've just been kind of reading ever since. So whenever I decided that I wanted to work on a portfolio piece, what popped into my mind was doing a book design. While I don't have a favorite book that we're going to redesign, I had been reading this book by Agatha Christie called The Monogram Murders that I thought would be a great thing to kind of redo and do in my own style. So since I've been reading the book, I already kind of know what goes on, and I already have an idea for what I might want to do. This is a very minor story spoiler, but in the book, they find 3 dead people in a hotel with cufflinks in their mouths, and on the cufflinks is a monogram of someone's name. So I thought it'd be a great cover to showcase the cufflink inside of the mouth, the monogram on it. I think I could do that in my own style and make it look really cool. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. But of course, as usual, I'm gonna go that direction, but we might end up going a different direction if I find that it's just not working the way that I thought it might, or if I just don't like the results. Either way, we at least have a starting point, so let's get started. So for the first idea that I wanted to work on, and it's actually not what I was talking about earlier in the video. While I was looking for some images to use to create what I actually had in mind, I actually found this image of some lips, and it was really weird at first, but I was intrigued by it, and I thought there was something interesting that I might be able to do with it. I also thought it'd be a good way to kind of show a variety so I could see what it would look like, you know, in a more lighter style, maybe a little more graphical, as well as one that's maybe a little bit more darker and more photograph. Anyways, I just started bringing in a lot of the elements and just trying to just get a rough pass of everything just to kind of see if I even like the idea and I want to continue with it. Along with the first pair of lips that I was using, I also found this other picture of, I guess, another pair of lips, and it looks like they either have paint or lipstick that's like dripping down. And I thought, one, it was just very bold and striking, but then also the lipstick or paint looks like blood. And so I kind of thought it would kind of tie into the whole murder aspect of this story. And so I also wanted to play around with that and see if I liked one or the other more. And after doing some back and forth, I did end up settling on the red lips instead. Now, I also wanted to try to experiment a little bit with the typography, because first I had it just kind of laid out center justified with it just kind of stacked on top of each other, which looks fine. I liked it, but I did want to try to maybe just kind of explore some other options. And so I wanted to explore using a circular option as well, which I did really like, but I didn't end up going with. I just didn't think that it looked or worked as well as just having the type stacked. Once I got everything kind of laid out and I liked the direction that I was going in, I could start to kind of nail in the details a little bit more and really go in and make it look photorealistic, or at least as photorealistic as I possibly can. Now, whenever I first started doing design, I really liked kind of doing these photorealistic edits where I try to make things look as realistic as I possibly can, whether that's how they actually were or not. But for a long time now, I really haven't done much of that. And so I kind of have to like get back in that headspace and like remember all of the tips and tricks that I used to use in order to make things look realistic. And so it's kind of like one of those things where relearning everything all over again, rather than just being able to just do the thing that I'm used to doing. And it's a little bit frustrating because I keep having to make small changes and adjustments because I'm like, oh yeah, that's not right. I need to do it this way. Or, oh, I actually need to add this, or I need to do it in this way. And so I keep having to backtrack and do things, and it's a little bit frustrating, but it is also fun to kind of get back into that headspace and kind of use those skills that I haven't really used in a while. But after quite a long time of going back through everything, trying to do as much as I possibly can and just be as detailed as I possibly can, finally came to a place where I felt like it was at least 80 to 90% done, and I could just leave it there and move on to the next design. So now we're moving on to the design that I was actually talking about at the beginning of this video, what I actually had in mind whenever I first thought about redoing this cover. I really liked the idea of doing a really close-up shot with a lot of dramatic shadows and lighting. I just think that paints a really interesting picture. The way that I think about it is whenever you're reading a mystery novel, a lot of the mystery is the fact that you're only getting small bits of details every so often, and then you're trying to, piece them all together. And so kind of what I like to do in order to kind of emulate that is to only show a portion of whatever we're looking at. So in this instance, we're not seeing the full person, we're not seeing who this person is or where they're at. We're only seeing that they are lying down and they have a cufflink in their mouth. And hopefully that's enough to kind of get someone intrigued or get some thoughts going so that maybe they can kind of come up with their own story, at least until they start reading the book and they have something to kind of make a theory on. Like I said, I'm really just trying to preserve the mystery of it, as well as kind of showcase that this is a mystery novel by only showing you a small scene from the book. But of course, just like our last design that we worked on, this one also has a lot of photorealistic elements that I kind of have to go back through and try and figure out exactly what I want to do and how to do it. Because once again, I don't really do this style anymore. And so it kind of takes me a while to get back in that headspace and remember all the tips and tricks and stuff and things that I should be looking out for. A good example is the cufflink. I actually realized that I had it placed the wrong way. The way that the shadows and the highlights were hitting the cufflink didn't really make sense for the lighting in the photograph. So I ended up having to just completely reverse it and then kind of fix some of the shadows and highlights that also didn't really work. It was a little bit of a pain to have to redo, but I think in the end, it was definitely worth redoing, and I think it's all better for it. Now for the typography, I went a little bit of a different route for this one. I did want to bring in some more of that traditional looking typography. So I really wanted to go with a script type like this, but I also really like a sans serif where it feels very kind of new and modern. And so I kind of wanted to kind of use both of them so that way it still feels like a modern book cover, but we also are bringing in some of the maybe older elements because the story does take place in the early 1900s, and so I feel like it fits well. We're doing a modern rendition of an older cover. I also liked the idea of making the typography gold, especially because we have that gold cufflink in the mouth, and so it kind of matches, but also since the background has a little bit of a blue tinge as well as the highlights on the skin, it's very blue, I feel like the yellow balances everything out, so where we have some cooler elements, but then we also have some warmer elements. And hopefully that creates a good balance, as well as good contrast, because once again, this is a mystery story, and so we want to feel some kind of tension. All right, so these designs should be at a pretty good place. Might change a few small things, but I think generally they're pretty much done. Now, before I move on to the back and the binding of the book, I wanted to decide on one of the designs so that way I'm not trying to come up with a bunch of different ideas. I can just focus in on the one cover that I'm going to be doing. After taking some time to think about which one I wanted to use, I landed on this one. While I do really like the other design that I came up with, I feel like it doesn't quite have the same aesthetic, emotion, or vibe that I feel like is in the book. So I feel like the other design is a little bit better suited for what the book is actually about. So I'll be basing the back and the binding off of this front cover, so that at least gives me a starting point. So now it's just time to design it. Get to it. So I ended up coming up with two different ideas for the back of the book. Now this first design is the one that I didn't end up using, and so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I did want to just kind of show you that I did try something other than just the one thing. It did take me time to land where I wanted to land. But like the front cover where we're only seeing a small portion from a scene from the book, I thought it would be interesting to do that again. And so I thought about using a doorknob because it takes place at a hotel with locked doors. So I thought that might be an interesting subject to use for the photograph. But really, most of the time that I spent on this design was really just trying to make the doorknob look as dramatic as I possibly could. So just using a lot of tricks in order to kind of change the lighting to make it a little bit more dramatic, because the original was just a little bit flat and didn't quite match up with the front cover. But once I had it in a place that I was happy with, I started adding in some of the other elements, like the description of the book, as well as a review that was on the back of the cover of the book that I was originally reading. And so while I didn't end up using the back cover exactly, I could take all the elements that I used, that I created here, and just move them into the other project to save me some time. Now, the second design that I came up was the one that I ended up going with. And really, it's just a key lying on a table or on a floor, some kind of wooden space, use your own interpretation. But I like that it was simple, had good contrast, as well as being gold, and so it would match with the rest of the book that has a kind of black and gold color scheme. But again, I just spent a lot of time making sure that the back cover matched the front cover in terms of contrast, shadows, highlights. I wanted to make it feel like it was part of the same scene. Almost like the first thing that you saw whenever you walked into this room, you saw the person, and then you looked down and saw the key. And once I had gotten to a pretty good spot, I could bring in those elements that I used on the last book cover, like the review as well as the description of the book, and then I could just kind of make some final tweaks in order to get it to where I felt like I was happy with the design. So here's the final result. Surprisingly, this came out almost exactly how I saw it in my head. It's a very close-up and detailed shot with dramatic shadows, and honestly, that's exactly what I pictured. Really, it's just a dramatized version of a scene from the book, and I think that's kind of an ideal scenario for a book cover like this. I also really like how the colors came out. There's just some slight blues in the background, and that goes really well with the kind of gold and yellow. So it creates a nice contrast where there's this more cooler colors as well as some warmth. Now, like I said, I typically don't work in this style, really photorealistic kind of photo bashing, but this was a lot of fun to do. It's always nice to kind of keep up with those skills, even though I don't use them a whole lot. So even though it took me a little bit longer than I would have liked to create this and get it to the point where I was happy with it, I'm just glad that I got to a point where I'm happy with it. So overall, I had a lot of fun making this, and I'm very happy with how it came out. But I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this. Did I do a good job? Did I do a bad job? Let me know what you think. And on that note, if you found this video helpful or entertaining in any way, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next video.